I held the keys to my very first home, a secret I guarded with my life. But the thrill shattered the moment the front door swung open, revealing my parents and my golden child sister strolling through my living room, already arguing over where to put her velvet sofa. For as long as I can remember, I existed in the shadows of my own family. My name is Jessica, but growing up, I might as well have been a ghost haunting the hallways of my childhood home. In the eyes of my parents, Brenda and William, there was only one child who truly mattered: my younger sister, Madison. Madison was the undeniable golden child. She was a pageant winner at 6, a varsity cheerleader at 16, and a master manipulator by 20. She had a way of batting her eyelashes that made my parents melt into puddles of compliance. If Madison wanted a new car for her sweet 16, my parents took out a second mortgage. When I turned 16 a year earlier, I got a bus pass and a lecture from my father about the importance of building character through public transportation. The disparity in how we were treated wasn't just a quiet undertone in our household, it was a blaring siren. When I graduated at the top of my university class with a degree in finance, my parents skipped the ceremony. Why? Because Madison had just gone through a dramatic breakup with a guy she had been dating for exactly 3 weeks, and Brenda insisted that Madison needed a family healing weekend at a luxury spa. I walked across the stage to receive my diploma to the sound of silence from the bleachers, clutching a cheap bouquet I had bought for myself. That was the day I made a silent vow. I realized that my family would never celebrate my milestones. If I shared my successes with them, they would either downplay them, ignore them, or find a way to make them about Madison. So, I decided to stop sharing entirely. I put myself on a strict information diet with my parents. I answered their calls, smiled politely at holiday dinners, and deflected any questions about my personal life or my finances. Over the next 6 years, I worked relentlessly. I poured every ounce of my energy into my career at a corporate financial firm. I took on extra shifts, worked weekends, and climbed the ladder while living in a cramped, drafty one-bedroom apartment. My friends thought I was crazy for living so frugally when I was making a comfortable 6-figure salary, but I had a hyper-fixated goal. I was going to buy my own sanctuary. A place where the walls were mine, the locks were mine, and the peace was uninterrupted. The search took nearly 8 months. I viewed dozens of properties with my real estate agent, Olivia, who quickly became one of my closest confidants. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I found it. It was a beautiful, completely renovated 3-bedroom craftsman house on Hawthorne Lane, nestled in a quiet, tree-lined suburb about 40 minutes away from my parents' house. It had a wraparound porch, original hardwood floors, and a stunning kitchen with deep forest green cabinets and a white farmhouse sink. The moment I stepped through the front door, the air felt different. It felt like breathing for the first time. The closing process was grueling, but a month later, I was sitting in a polished conference room, signing my name on the final line of a towering stack of mortgage documents. Olivia handed me a heavy brass key with a wide grin. "You did it, Jess," she said, popping a bottle of sparkling cider. "You're a homeowner." I drove to the house that evening, sitting on the bare floor of the empty living room with a box of takeout pizza. I cried tears of pure, unadulterated relief. For the first time in my 28 years, I had something that belonged entirely to me. Something my parents couldn't take away, and something Madison couldn't overshadow. I made the firm decision to keep the house a complete secret from my family. I knew exactly how it would play out if I told them. Brenda would criticize the neighborhood, William would tell me I overpaid, and Madison would somehow find a way to make it about her, probably by complaining that my guest room wasn't up to her standards for when she wanted a free weekend getaway. I planned to slowly move my things over the next few weeks, completely transitioning my life to Hawthorne Lane before ever giving them my new address. However, I made one critical, devastating mistake. 2 days after closing, my mother dropped by my apartment unannounced. She claimed she was in the neighborhood and needed to use my restroom. I was distracted, rushing to get ready for a work meeting, and I left my purse sitting open on the kitchen counter. Inside that purse was my newly minted brass house key, attached to a distinctive leather keychain, and a folded copy of my final closing disclosure, which clearly stated the new property address. I didn't notice anything was amiss when Brenda left. She kissed my cheek, told me my apartment smelled like cheap laundry detergent, and breezed out the door. I had no idea that in those brief 5 minutes she was alone in my kitchen, my mother had dug through my bag, found my paperwork, and snapped photos of everything, and worse, she had slipped the spare key off the ring and buried it in her pocket. Saturday morning arrived with bright, streaming sunlight. I woke up in my drafty apartment, threw on my oldest pair of paint-splattered sweatpants, and drove over to the new house. I hadn't moved my furniture yet. The house was completely empty save for a few boxes of books and a ladder I had bought for painting. My plan for the weekend was simple. Paint the master bedroom a calming shade of sage green and scrub the baseboards until they shined. I parked my modest sedan in the garage, pulling the door shut behind me so the house looked unoccupied from the street. I wanted total privacy. I had been working for about 2 hours, humming along to a playlist echoing from my portable speaker when I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Tires on the gravel driveway. I paused, my paintbrush hovering midair. I assumed it was a delivery driver or maybe a neighbor coming to introduce themselves. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked out of the bedroom, heading toward the front hallway. Then, a sound sent a hard spike of ice straight into my veins. The unmistakable metal-on-metal scrape of a key sliding into the deadbolt of my front door. My heart hammered against my ribs. I hadn't given a key to anyone. Even Olivia had turned over the lockbox. Before I could even shout out a warning, the heavy oak door swung open, and sunlight flooded my pristine entryway. In walked Brenda, wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a tray of iced coffees. Behind her was William, holding a measuring tape, and bringing up the rear was Madison, scrolling on her phone, oblivious to the world. I stood frozen at the end of the hallway, a wet paintbrush dripping onto my shoe. My brain short-circuited. I literally could not process the visual information in front of me. "Oh, ew!" Madison's whiny voice echoed off the high ceilings as she looked up from her phone. "Mom, you said the floors were nice. These are so orange." We are definitely ripping these out and putting down gray vinyl. Gray is so much more modern. "Whatever you want, sweetie," Brenda cooed, stepping inside and kicking the door shut behind her. "Daddy can start pulling up the boards this weekend. And look at this natural light. It's perfect for a nursery." "Nursery?" I whispered, finally finding my voice. The three of them whipped their heads around, gasping as if they had just seen a ghost. "Jessica," Brenda yelped, nearly dropping the iced coffees. What are you doing here?" The sheer audacity of the question acted like a defibrillator to my stunned brain. A hot, blinding wave of fury replaced my shock. "What am I doing here?" I demanded, marching down the hallway, my voice vibrating with rage. "This is my house! The real question is, how the hell did you get in here, and what are you doing inside my property?" Brenda recovered quickly, her initial shock melting into that familiar, condescending smirk she always wore when dealing with me. She set the coffees down on the built-in console table. "Oh, calm down, drama queen," Brenda scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "We know you bought the house. I saw the paperwork on your counter the other day. I knew you were being sneaky about something, and I took the spare key you left in your bag. Honestly, Jess, leaving important documents lying around? It's irresponsible. You went through my purse, you stole my key." I was practically shaking. "That is breaking and entering. You need to leave. Right now." William stepped forward, puffing out his chest, using his physical presence to try and intimidate me the way he had when I was a teenager. "Watch your tone with your mother, Jessica. We came here to do you a favor. We're taking this burden off your hands." I let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. "Burden? I just bought this house. It's mine." "Well, you don't really need it, do you?" Madison chimed in, crossing her arms and looking around the beautiful entryway with a sneer of entitlement. "You're single. You have no friends. You just sit on your laptop all day. What do you need 3 bedrooms for? Kevin and I are trying for a baby, and our lease is up next month. Mom and Dad agreed that it makes way more sense for me to have this house." I stared at my sister, genuinely wondering if she had suffered a traumatic brain injury. You think you're just going to take my house?" "Don't be selfish, Jessica," Brenda said, her voice dripping with faux disappointment. "Madison is starting a family. She needs stability. You can stay in your little apartment. It suits you perfectly. We figured we'd just take over the property. You can transfer the deed to Madison. and we'll reimburse you for your little down payment, eventually. Think of it as your contribution to your future niece or nephew. I was standing in the middle of a nightmare. They weren't just stepping over my boundaries, they were obliterating them with a bulldozer. My own family had conspired to rob me of the biggest achievement of my life, simply because Madison wanted it. They genuinely believed I would just roll over, sign away my mortgage, and hand my sister the keys to a $500,000 home I had bled for. "Get out," I said, my voice dropping an octave, losing all trace of emotion. It was cold, hard, and final. William frowned, his face turning an angry shade of purple. "Now you listen here, little girl." "No, you listen," I snapped, pointing the wet paintbrush directly at his chest. "I bought this house. My name is on the mortgage, the deed, and the insurance. You stole my property to break in. You have exactly 30 seconds to walk out that front door, or I am calling the police and pressing charges for burglary." Madison rolled her eyes, scoffing loudly. "God, you are so dramatic. Mom, tell her to stop being a psycho." "Jessica, stop this nonsense at once," Brenda commanded, taking a step toward me. "You are not calling the police on your own family. We are moving Madison's things in on Wednesday. Kevin already canceled their lease. You are going to sign the paperwork, and that is final." Kevin had already canceled their lease. They had banked on this. They had completely sabotaged Madison's living situation under the delusion that they could bully me into submission. The sheer arrogance of it was staggering. 20 seconds, I said, pulling my phone from my pocket and dialing 911, keeping my thumb hovering over the call button. William grabbed Brenda's arm, realizing for the first time that the obedient, quiet daughter they used to walk all over had completely disappeared. "She's bluffing," he muttered, though he didn't sound convinced. "I don't bluff," I said, staring directly into my mother's eyes. 10 seconds. Brenda's face contorted into an ugly mask of pure rage. "You are a selfish, ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you, you can't even help your sister when she needs you?" "You've done nothing for me," I screamed, the years of suppressed resentment finally erupting. "Get the hell out of my house!" Madison huffed, grabbing her iced coffee. "Whatever. Let's go, Mom. We'll just get a lawyer. She legally has to share it with family anyway." The staggering stupidity of Madison's comment almost made me laugh, but I held my ground. William shoved past me, deliberately bumping my shoulder hard enough to send me stumbling back a step. Brenda followed, glaring daggers at me. "You're going to regret this, Jessica," Brenda hissed as she stepped onto the porch. "You are dead to us." "Keep the key," I called out as they stormed toward their car. "I'm changing the locks in an hour anyway." I slammed the heavy oak door and engaged the deadbolt, leaning my back against the wood. My hands were shaking so violently I dropped my phone. I slid down to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest as the adrenaline began to crash. I had won the battle, but as I listened to my father's truck peel out of my driveway, kicking up gravel in its wake, a heavy dread settled in my stomach. I knew my mother. I knew William. And I knew the lengths they would go to for Madison. This wasn't the end of it. They had canceled Madison's lease. They had set their sights on my home. And as I sat on the floor of my empty house, I realized the war had just begun. Within an hour of my family's hostile departure, the locksmith arrived. I didn't just change the deadbolts. I upgraded to heavy-duty, commercial-grade locks, reinforced the door jambs, and installed a comprehensive security system with cameras covering every inch of the perimeter. I spent the rest of the weekend jumping at every shadow, but I managed to move my mattress and a few essentials into the house. I wasn't going to let them intimidate me out of my own home. On Monday morning, I met my new neighbor, Fiona. She was a fiery woman in her 60s with a shock of bright red hair and a penchant for gardening. She noticed the new cameras and asked if there had been break-ins. I gave her the abridged version of my family drama. Fiona's eyes narrowed. "Honey, you let me know if those vultures come back. I've got a hose and I'm not afraid to use it." I didn't have to wait long. Wednesday arrived, the day Brenda had smugly declared Madison was moving in. I took the day off work, sitting in my living room with a mug of coffee, watching my security camera feeds on my iPad. At exactly 10 a.m., a massive, rusted moving truck rumbled down Hawthorne Lane and backed into my driveway, crushing Fiona's prize-winning petunias on the property line. Out hopped Madison, looking like she was dressed for a Coachella photo shoot, followed by Kevin, her perpetually unemployed boyfriend who fancied himself a crypto entrepreneur. Brenda and William pulled up a moment later in their SUV. I hit the record button on my camera app and walked to the front door, leaving it locked. Through the glass panes, I watched Kevin march up to the door and confidently shove the stolen, now useless brass key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. He jiggled it, cursed, and tried again. Madison stomped her foot. "Mom, the key doesn't work. She changed the locks." Madison whined, her voice piercing the thick glass. Brenda marched up the steps, her face flushed with indignation. She began pounding on the heavy oak door with her fists. "Jessica, open this door right now. We have a moving truck paying by the hour. Stop being a petulant child and let your sister inside." I stood in the hallway, silent, watching them unravel. When I didn't answer, William stepped up, holding a crowbar he had retrieved from his trunk. My breath hitched. He was actually going to try and break in. "Stand back, Maddie," William grunted, wedging the metal bar into the door frame. Before he could even apply pressure, a siren wailed at the end of the street. 2 police cruisers swung onto Hawthorne Lane, their lights flashing brilliantly against the morning sun. I had called the non-emergency line the moment the moving truck appeared, reporting a potential break-in by estranged relatives. The officers stepped out, hands resting cautiously on their belts. Fiona, true to her word, was standing on her porch holding her garden hose, pointing aggressively at my family. "Drop the crowbar, sir," the lead officer commanded, his voice echoing off the quiet suburban houses. The ensuing scene was a masterclass in public humiliation. William dropped the crowbar like it was made of lava. Brenda immediately turned on the waterworks, playing the victim. She sobbed to the officers that there had been a terrible misunderstanding and that they were just helping their daughter move into her new house. I opened the front door, handed the officer a folder containing my deed, my mortgage statement, and my photo ID, and then showed him the security footage of William attempting to pry my door open. "These people do not have permission to be on my property," I stated calmly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I want them trespassed." The officer looked at my paperwork, then turned to my parents with a hardened expression. "Ma'am, this house belongs to Jessica. You need to pack up your truck and leave immediately, or you will all be arrested for attempted burglary and trespassing." Madison shrieked. "But my lease is up. Where am I supposed to live?" "That sounds like a civil issue, miss," the officer replied dryly. "Off the property, now." They had to pay the movers to drive all of Madison's belongings back to Brenda and William's house. As they drove away, humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood, Brenda rolled down her window and screamed that I would pay for this. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. The real warfare was about to move from my front porch to the courtroom. A week later, I was served with a thick stack of legal documents. My jaw dropped as I read through the complaint. Brenda and William were suing me for fraud and breach of verbal contract. The lawsuit claimed that the $80,000 down payment I had used for the house was actually a family fund that they had entrusted to me to hold for Madison's future home. They alleged I had maliciously stolen the money to buy the property for myself. They were petitioning the court to put a lien on my house and force a sale to recoup their money. It was a complete fabrication, a desperate, unhinged lie. But it was a lie that could potentially freeze my assets and drag me through years of legal hell. I immediately hired Nathan, a ruthless, seasoned litigation attorney who came highly recommended by my firm's legal department. Nathan took one look at the complaint and laughed out loud. "They're going to bury themselves," Nathan said, tossing the papers onto his mahogany desk. "But we are going to let them dig the hole as deep as possible before we throw the dirt in." For 4 months, I lived in a state of high anxiety. My parents' lawyer, a flashy, aggressive guy who clearly thrived on intimidation, bombarded Nathan with ridiculous discovery requests, demanding years of my bank statements, text messages, and emails. I complied with everything, because I had absolutely nothing to hide. The turning point came during the deposition. We were sitting in a sterile conference room. Brenda and William sat across from me, glaring with a toxic mixture of hatred and smugness. Madison hadn't bothered to show up. Their lawyer started aggressively questioning me about where I got the $80,000. Nathan smoothly slid a bound financial dossier across the table. I'll save us all some time, Nathan said, his voice dripping with professional condescension. Exhibits A through F. These are my client's bank records for the last 6 years. You will see every single direct deposit from her employer. You will see her transferring exactly 30% of every paycheck into a high-yield savings account. You will see the compound interest. There is not a single transfer, wire, or check from William or Brenda in these accounts. Not a dime. Nathan then leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Now, during discovery, we subpoenaed your client's financial records to verify the existence of this alleged family fund. Oddly enough, we found no such fund. We did, however, find that William and Brenda took out a $50,000 second mortgage on their primary residence exactly 2 weeks after Jessica closed on her house. Brenda went pale. William choked on his coffee. Nathan smiled like a shark smelling blood. It appears your clients took out a massive loan to pay your retainer and to fund a lawsuit based entirely on perjury. We will be moving for immediate dismissal and requesting that your clients pay all of Jessica's legal fees. If you push this to a judge, I will personally ensure the district attorney sees the transcript of this attempted fraud. The lawsuit was dropped 3 days later. The judge, furious at the blatant abuse of the court system, granted our motion for sanctions, ordering my parents to pay my $15,000 in attorney fees. But the legal victory was only the beginning of the karma that was about to hit my family like a runaway freight train. Because Madison and Kevin had prematurely broken their lease, expecting to steal my home, they had been forced to move into Brenda and William's house. 2 adult narcissists and a wannabe crypto bro crammed into a rapidly shrinking, tense environment was a recipe for disaster. With the lawsuit dropped and my parents now legally on the hook for my attorney fees, the financial reality set in. Brenda and William had drained their savings and leveraged their home equity to fight a losing battle, all to appease Madison. The stress cracked the family wide open. The first casualty was Kevin. Kevin, it turned out, was only with Madison because she projected an image of wealth and ease. He thought he was marrying into a family that would hand him a $500,000 house on a silver platter. When he realized Madison was broke, her parents were drowning in debt, and there was no free ride, his love evaporated overnight. Worse, Fiona, my eagle-eyed neighbor, who had become a dear friend, managed to uncover Kevin's true colors. She had a niece who worked at a high-end gym downtown. Through the local grapevine, it got back to me that Kevin had been actively pursuing a wealthy, older client at the gym for months. The day the lawsuit was dropped, Kevin packed his bags, completely ghosted Madison, and moved into the older woman's downtown penthouse. Madison had a total mental breakdown. The golden child, completely abandoned by her meal ticket, resorted to screaming matches with Brenda, blaming her parents for ruining her life by not successfully stealing my house. But the hardest hit of karma was yet to come. My parents had taken out a second mortgage with an incredibly predatory, variable interest rate just to afford the lawyer to sue me. Between the monthly payments on the new loan, the sanctions they owed me, and the mounting credit card debt from funding Madison's depression shopping sprees, they started missing payments. 6 months after the failed moving day at my house, I received a Google alert I had set up out of morbid curiosity. It was a public foreclosure notice in the local county registry. Brenda and William had defaulted on their mortgage. A year later, their home, the house I had grown up in, the house where I was treated like a second-class citizen, was sold at auction by the bank. They lost all the equity they had built over 30 years. They were forced to downsize into a cramped, drafty 2-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of town. Madison, completely refusing to get a real job, had to share a tiny room with boxes of her old pageant trophies and designer clothes she could no longer afford to dry clean. They got exactly the life they had tried to force upon me. As for me, I painted my master bedroom that calming shade of sage green. I planted new petunias with Fiona. I excelled at my firm, unburdened by the toxic weight of my family's expectations. I still have the heavy brass key on my leather keychain, a constant reminder of the day I stopped being the invisible daughter and built a fortress they could never breach. Thank you for listening to my story. Family betrayal is a hard pill to swallow, but setting strict boundaries and knowing your legal rights can save your future. If my journey resonated with you, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more true dramatic life stories.